My parents just offered to pay for my entire medical school tuition, my lifelong dream. The condition? I have to sign a surrogacy contract agreeing to give them my firstborn child for my infertile sister. They called it keeping the legacy alive. My name is Paige, I'm 28, and I'm a mountain rescue paramedic in Aspen, Colorado. My life is about grit, service, and survival under pressure. My family's life is about something else entirely: image, status, and the careful performance of perfection. It all came to a head at the lavish 50th anniversary brunch for our family's iconic ski lodge. My great-uncle, Walter, the 80-year-old patriarch who founded the entire enterprise, was on stage, supposedly to give a celebratory speech. Instead, he looked out at the crowd of Aspen's elite, his piercing blue eyes bypassing my parents and my younger brother, Carson, to land directly on me. "Today," he announced, his voice booming with an authority no one had heard in decades, "I'm invoking the founder's clause of the family charter, a clause that allows the founder to name a successor based on proven character and service to the community." My brother, Carson, who had been gifted majority control of the family company just the night before, froze mid-sip of his mimosa. "Therefore," Walter declared, "effective immediately, control of the Monroe Family Trust, and this lodge, will not pass to my nephew or his son. It passes to my grandniece, Paige. The one you all sent into a blizzard last night, hoping she'd conveniently disappear. This isn't just a family squabble, it's one of the most brutal family revenge stories this town has ever seen." To understand the stunned silence that followed, you have to understand the night they used my duty as a weapon against me. If you've ever felt like your family valued your image more than your actual substance, just type the city you're watching from. I want to know where the people of real character are tonight. To understand my family, you have to understand Aspen. Not the tourist version with the expensive ski passes and designer boutiques, but the old guard society where families measure their worth in social standing and carefully maintained legacies. The Monroes were a pillar of that world, and within our family, the roles were set from birth. My younger brother, Carson, was the prince, born to inherit the empire. He was handsome, charming, and effortlessly popular. He managed a small portion of the family trust, which, from what I could tell, mostly meant he was good at throwing lavish parties at our ski lodge and networking with other heirs on the golf course. He was the one featured in the society pages of the Aspen Times, the one my parents, Richard and Victoria, proudly showed off at fundraising galas. He was their brilliant, shining future, the heir to the throne. I was the other one, the paramedic. A noble profession, they'd say with a tight, polite smile, but it wasn't a career that brought prestige or power to the Monroe name. While Carson was closing deals in a heated chairlift, I was performing CPR at 10,000 feet on a frozen mountainside. While he was being praised for hosting a successful charity auction, I was setting broken bones in the back of a helicopter during a whiteout. I was the one who earned quiet respect from the ski patrol, the sheriff's department, and the local firefighters, the real community of this mountain. But in my own family, I was a curiosity, a blue-collar daughter who didn't quite fit their polished narrative. I was the rock, solid and dependable, but they only had eyes for their jewel. Every family seems to have one of each, right? The one who is valued for their sparkle and the one valued for their strength. Type jewel if you were the one meant to shine, or type rock if you were the one everyone else leaned on. I really want to see the balance in this community. This dynamic was never clearer than on the night of the lodge's 50th anniversary gala. The event was the pinnacle of the Aspen social season, a grand ballroom glittering with billionaires, senators, and local power players. My father, Richard, stood on stage and made the grand announcement everyone was expecting. He was officially passing control of the Monroe family holding company to his successor, my brother, Carson. The crowd applauded wildly as my brother took the stage, the perfect image of a young, powerful heir ready to take the reins. Then, my father called my name. "We also want to honor our brave daughter, Paige," he announced, his voice smooth and practiced. For her tireless service to this community, in front of hundreds of people, my mother presented me with an oversized check. It was for $60,000. She leaned into the microphone. "This is Paige's annual paramedic salary, a donation from the family so she can continue her important work without financial worry. I stood there, frozen, as the crowd gave a polite, pitying applause. They hadn't given me a gift. They had publicly reduced my life's calling to a charity they sponsored. I wasn't an heir, I was the help. But the humiliation wasn't over. Moments later, my mother rushed over to me, her face a perfect mask of panic. "Paige, there's an emergency," she whispered urgently. "A very important VIP guest is stranded up at the old Northridge cabin. The blizzard is getting worse, and the ski patrol can't get their snowcat through the drifts. You're the only one who can make it on a high-powered snowmobile." My training, my duty as a paramedic, kicked in, overriding the fresh sting of their insult. Of course, I would go. A life was potentially at stake. I ran to get my gear, completely unaware that the emergency was a lie, a vicious ploy designed to get me out of the way, and that the life they were so casually putting at risk was my own. I didn't even change out of my formal wear. I just threw my bright orange emergency paramedic parka over the thin fabric of my dress, grabbed my trauma bag and radio, and ran for the high-powered snowmobile we kept garaged for high-altitude rescues. The wind was already howling, whipping snow into a blinding curtain of white. The temperature had dropped to 10 degrees Fahrenheit and was still falling. Every instinct I had screamed that this was a foolish, dangerous run, but the thought of someone stranded, alone and freezing, pushed me forward. It's what I do. The journey up the mountain was a brutal fight for every foot of progress. The snowmobile's powerful headlight cut a pathetic, narrow beam into the swirling darkness. Drifts of fresh powder, already feet deep, threatened to swallow the machine whole, forcing me to navigate by instinct and memory. As the engine screamed against the wind, the raw injustice of the night burned in my chest, a single point of heat in the freezing cold. They were in a warm, gilded ballroom, toasting my brother's success with $100 bottles of champagne, while I was risking my life in a blizzard, sent on a mission they had arranged. They weren't just overlooking me, they were using the best part of me, my duty, my skill, my willingness to serve as a convenient tool to get me out of their perfect family picture. The higher I climbed, the colder the air became, but the hotter the anger burned inside me. There's a clarity that comes only from facing a storm, whether it's on a mountain or in your own life. When everything is trying to break you, you find out what you're really made of. If you've ever had to push through your own personal blizzard, just type the word survivor in the comments below. We all know what that fight feels like. After what felt like an eternity of fighting the storm, my muscles aching from controlling the snowmobile, I finally saw the faint, warm glow of the Northridge cabin through the thick veil of snow. I parked the machine, grabbed my medical bag, and pushed through the heavy drift blocking the door, my mind running through emergency protocols for treating hypothermia. Instead of a panicked, freezing victim, I found the cabin warm and cozy, a fire crackling merrily in the stone hearth. And sitting in a large leather armchair with a glass of whiskey and a book was my great-uncle Walter, the founder, the patriarch. He looked up, his sharp eyes showing surprise, but not a hint of alarm. "Paige," he said, his voice calm and steady. "What on earth are you doing up here in the middle of this blizzard?" I'm here to rescue you," I said, my training giving way to utter confusion as I lowered my trauma bag. "Mom and Dad said you were stranded, a VIP guest having a medical emergency." Walter set his glass down on the side table, a slow, dangerous anger hardening his features. "Your brother," he said, his voice flat and cold, "invited me up here for a private family discussion an hour ago. He wanted to get my blessing before the big announcement. The fool must not have checked the weather forecast." He looked at my bright orange paramedic parka worn over my ruined, formal dress, at the exhaustion and snow caked on my face. He put the pieces together in an instant. "They didn't send you here to rescue me, child," he said, his voice now like ice. "They sent you here so you wouldn't be there to see them anoint their prince. They used me as bait, and they risked your life as a diversion." I just stood there, the adrenaline finally leaving my body, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. He saw it all. He understood everything. In the heart of that manufactured storm, I had stumbled upon my only ally, and he was furious. We stayed at the cabin overnight, waiting for the worst of the blizzard to pass while the fireplace crackled. Walter and I talked for hours, sharing stories about my parents and his early days building the lodge. He didn't tell me his exact plan, only that we both needed to be at the anniversary brunch at 11 a.m. sharp, and that I should let him do the talking. When we walked into the brunch the next morning, my family's faces were a picture of absolute shock. They clearly thought I was still stuck on the mountain, a problem they could deal with later. Carson was holding court near the grand fireplace, accepting congratulations on his new role when he saw us. The color drained from his face. After everyone was seated with their mimosas, Walter walked to the small stage where a jazz trio was playing. He took the microphone, and the room fell silent, expecting a heartwarming toast from the family patriarch. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate 50 years of this lodge," he began, his voice calm and powerful. Last night, this family's character was put to the test. They were faced with a choice: honor a legacy of integrity or pursue one of selfish ambition. He then recounted, in cold, precise detail, the story of the fake emergency. He told the assembled guests how they sent me, his grandniece, and their own daughter into a deadly storm, using him as bait. They used Paige's greatest strength, her selfless duty, as a tool for their own petty, greedy drama, he said, his voice laced with contempt. The founder's clause in our family charter, which I wrote 50 years ago, is clear. The stewardship of this legacy is not a birthright. It must be earned. It requires character, service, and grit. He looked directly at me, across the room. Qualities Paige has proven she has in spades, and which, I am sad to say, the rest of you have proven you utterly lack. Therefore, I am invoking that clause. Control of the Monroe Family Trust is hereby transferred to Paige, effective immediately. He set the microphone down, the thud echoing in the dead silent room. The silence was shattered not by applause, but by my mother's shriek. "Walter, you can't be serious," she yelled, standing up so quickly she knocked over a water glass, the sound echoing her own unraveling. "This is absurd. We'll sue you. That clause isn't legally valid. You're senile." My father rushed to her side, his face purple with a rage I had never seen, shouting about lawyers and contesting Walter's mental competence. The brunch dissolved into a cacophony of hushed gossip and hurried exits as guests scrambled to escape the spectacular implosion of the Monroe dynasty. But my eyes weren't on them. They were on my brother. Carson wasn't shouting. He had sunk into his chair, his face ghostly pale, his breathing coming in ragged, shallow gasps. He was hyperventilating, his hands trembling as he tugged at the knot of his expensive tie. The confident Prince of Aspen had vanished, replaced by a terrified boy on the verge of collapse. My anger momentarily gave way to a paramedic's instinct. I walked over to his table as the noise of our parents' threats faded into the background. "Carson?" I asked quietly. "I couldn't do it," he gasped, looking up at me with wide, panicked eyes. "I couldn't live up to his legacy. To Dad's. Everyone expected me to be the next great Monroe, but I'm not. The trust was losing money from my bad investments. Selling the lodge, it was the only way I could see to get out from under the pressure before everyone found out I was a failure." His confession wasn't an excuse, but it was a pathetic, human truth. His betrayal wasn't born from pure malice, but from the crushing weight of an expectation he could never meet. Family confrontations are never clean, are they? There's no neat victory, just the messy, painful wreckage of what came before. If you've ever had to watch your own family implode just to find the truth, this community is for you. Subscribe and stand with those of us who have navigated the fallout. Later that evening, after Carson had been taken home by a friend and the last of the shell-shocked staff had gone, I found my parents sitting in the lodge's cavernous great room, staring into the dying embers of the fire. The adrenaline of the day had faded, leaving a hollow, aching silence between us. "You know," I began, my voice quiet but clear in the vast room. "Last winter, I rappelled down a 300-foot ravine in the middle of a blizzard to stabilize a skier who had a compound femur fracture. I sat with him in a snow cave I dug with my own hands, keeping him from bleeding out for 2 hours until the rescue helicopter could find us. He lived. He has 3 kids." My mother looked up, her expression confused by the abrupt change of subject. "What does that have to do with anything, Paige?" "The same week," I continued, ignoring her question, Carson was featured in the Aspen Times for donating $50,000 from the trust fund at a charity gala. You framed that article and hung it in the main hallway. You never once asked for the details of that rescue. You never asked if I was okay. I finally had their full, undivided attention. You were never proud of what I do, I said, the truth of it settling between us like a physical weight. You were only ever embarrassed that it didn't come with a black tie dinner or a photo opportunity. You measured Carson's worth by the company he kept and the money he managed. You measured my worth by the salary you felt you had to donate to me. You spent so much time polishing your jewel that you never realized the rock was actually a diamond. You weren't just blind to my value, you were valuing the wrong things entirely. They had no answer. There was none to give. My parents retreated into a shell of wounded pride after that night, communicating with me only through their lawyers. But Carson, surprisingly, did something different. He disappeared for a month. No calls, no texts. I later found out through a mutual friend that he had checked himself into a wellness retreat in the desert to deal with the crippling anxiety and pressure that had led to his breakdown. When he returned to Aspen, he didn't call me to ask for forgiveness or to talk about the trust fund. He simply showed up at the mountain rescue headquarters one morning while I was inventorying medical supplies. He just stood in the doorway, looking awkward and out of place in his expensive clothes amidst our rugged gear. "I was wondering," he said, not quite meeting my eye, "if you guys ever need volunteers. For fundraising or grant writing. The business stuff, I'm good at that." I was stunned into silence. But I saw he was serious. So I gave him a chance. He started coming in 3 times a week, sitting in a small, cluttered office, using the business skills our father had taught him to organize our chaotic finances and write compelling grant proposals to secure funding for new equipment. He never once mentioned the lodge or the inheritance. One afternoon, he finally explained. "I was always so jealous of you, Paige," he admitted, looking out the window at the mountains. "Not of your job, but of your purpose. You were free. You had something that was yours, something real. I was just managing Dad's expectations." His actions, more than his words, were his apology. He was finally learning to serve something other than his own image. Rebuilding trust is a quiet, fragile process, isn't it? It's not about grand apologies, but small, consistent actions. We do. Subscribe if you believe that the truest apologies are the ones that are shown, not just spoken, and if you believe in the messy, difficult hope of a second chance. While Carson was quietly finding his new path on the ground, I was forging mine from the summit. Taking control of the Monroe family trust was daunting. For weeks, I was buried in financial reports and legal documents, untangling the mess of risky investments my brother had made and charting a new, more stable course. The board, now firmly on my side after Walter's intervention, expected me to focus on maximizing profits and restoring our brand's damaged image in the high society circles. I had a very different idea of what restoring the brand truly meant. My first official act as head of the trust wasn't to hire a new marketing team or plan another lavish event. It was to establish the Walter Legacy Fund. I announced that a significant percentage of the lodge's annual profits would be permanently allocated to supporting the Aspen Mountain Rescue teams, my team, and other local emergency services. We would fund state-of-the-art, new equipment, advanced training programs, and provide scholarships for new paramedics and firefighters wanting to serve in challenging mountain communities. Furthermore, the lodge itself would become a hub for community safety. We began offering free avalanche awareness and wilderness survival courses to locals and tourists alike. The grand ballroom that once hosted my family's self-congratulatory galas would now be used for community first aid certification classes. The change was radical. We were shifting the purpose of our family's legacy from one of exclusive luxury to one of inclusive service. My parents, communicating through their lawyer, called it financial suicide. But the community, the real heart and soul of Aspen, called it something else entirely. Leadership. The Monroe name was no longer just about wealth. It was beginning to stand for something far more valuable. It was beginning to stand for character. Transforming the lodge's mission was about more than just changing a business model. It was about recalibrating my own internal compass. For years, I had subconsciously sought my parents' approval, hoping that one day they would finally see my worth through the only lens they understood: success, prestige, and power. Now, ironically, I had all of those things, but I realized with a profound sense of peace that I no longer needed their validation. One afternoon, I was standing in my great-uncle Walter's old office, which was now mine, looking out at the majestic, snow-capped peak of the mountain that overlooked our valley. On the wall was a framed photo of a young Walter, not in a suit, but in rugged climbing gear, standing on that same summit after a difficult ascent. I finally understood him, and in doing so, I understood myself. The true inheritance he had given me wasn't the millions of dollars in the trust or the deed to the lodge. His real legacy, his most precious gift, was the trust he placed in my character. He saw my years of service as a paramedic, the quiet dedication, the grit required to face a storm, as the true measure of a person. He didn't hand me power because I was a Monroe by blood. He handed it to me because he believed my actions had made me worthy of it. That realization was the final, liberating click in my soul. My parents' inability to see me was a reflection of their own limited values, not a reflection of my worth. I didn't need to be their jewel, because I was the rock. I was the mountain itself, resilient, steadfast, and defined not by who owned me, but by what I could withstand and the shelter I could provide. That was a summit I had reached all on my own, and the view from up here was finally clear. So that's the story of how my family's attempt to discard me ended with them accidentally handing me their entire legacy. It's a wilder tale than most family revenge stories, because the ultimate revenge wasn't a hostile takeover or a bitter lawsuit. It was a quiet act of service in a storm that revealed the undeniable truth of who we all were. And that's the real lesson here, the one my great-uncle Walter understood all along, and the one I want to leave with you. My family taught me that money can buy you a place on the mountain, but it can't buy you the strength to climb it. A true legacy isn't a stock portfolio or a deed to a property. It's the reputation you build through your actions, day after day. Your character is your true north, the only compass that won't fail you when you're lost in a blizzard. They were so focused on the shiny jewel that they forgot that the rock is the one that actually endures the storm. My brother is slowly rebuilding his life, and I truly hope he finds a purpose that is genuinely his own. My parents and I have a distant but civil relationship, but I'm no longer defined by them or by their expectations. I'm defined by the choices I make, the community I serve, and the legacy of character I am now building in my own way. If you believe that what you do is more important than what you own, and that your character is your greatest asset, then this is the community for you. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we share stories about navigating life's storms and finding our own true north. Because your real worth is in the person you choose to be.